Arcade. I read a couple books for the Halloween season. I wish I could have read more, but I did a couple other videos for earlier in the month. The first video I did, I was reading Goosebumps books as an adult. I hadn't read any since I was a child. That video will be linked in the description below. And then I did one where I read extreme horror, and I read The Slob and The Son of the Slob. That was a crazy video. That one will also be linked in the description below if you want to watch it. But this video, I'm just going to be talking about 3 books that I read specifically in the horror genre to kind of get myself amped up for Halloween. Enough talk, let's get right into it with the first book, Mapping the Interior. This book was written by Stephen Graham Jones, and it's a really interesting book. It's a short book too. This book comes in at only 96 pages in total. So if you want a short read, pick this up. It was $5. I got it at least for $5 at Barnes & Noble. And I knocked this book out in like 2 days, I think. I probably could have read it in a day, but I was really enjoying it, so I kind of took my time with it a little more. So this book follows our main character, Junior. And this is a Native American boy whose father passed away a few years ago. And he lives with his mother and his brother Dino in a mobile home. And one night, as he's kind of sitting in the living room, he sees his father walk by, kind of in his peripheral almost, in the kitchen to like his brother's bedroom. That's the inciting incident of the story. And from there, it all kind of unravels. So normally I would want to do a little bit of like a bigger summary where I can talk about kind of spoilers or stuff that might give the book away a little bit more. With this book, I'm just going to tell you, go out and buy it. You can probably find a free version online if you just look it up. But it's so short, I'd really rather just tell you to read it and give you my thoughts on it without summarizing it too much. So this book, and kind of all the books I'm going to talk about today, I felt like they were a little bit harder to analyze for me. I don't know if it's just the genre or if it's because I picked weird books, but typically I think I'm kind of okay at picking out like the themes of a book and everything in general. And with a lot of these, I just was a little bit lost. Maybe it's also because I was reading very fast since I was trying to read a whole lot for before Halloween. But this plays out in a little bit more of a mystery type story than it does straight up horror. But it definitely has horror elements in it, a lot. And I would just call it a horror book, but the story is more mysterious. It kind of has this through line of this young boy who's lost his father, and now he has to almost step into the role of the eldest like man of the house a little bit. And his father in life wasn't very successful. So now in his own head, he's kind of expecting himself to break the curse, kind of putting that weight on his shoulders. And in the book, it said that that's kind of specifically a thing in the native community of these people that maybe the father is like a burnout or something. And then they're like, well, the son's going to be different. And then the son isn't different. And then it's just kind of vicious cycle that keeps continuing. So I think that's kind of another piece of this book is breaking the cycles that are set up for you in life and everything. This book has a bunch of these times where you're reading it and you're like, oh, whoa, okay, I get it now. And I love that in a book when I'm reading and there's a moment where it kind of clicks together, something previous in the story connecting with something now. And there's a whole bunch of that in this book. So I just absolutely loved it. And with this one, again, it's a really short book. So in my opinion, I would say I feel like it's kind of hard for me to put down a book as short as this one. You know, under 100 pages, it's kind of hard to say really any big gripes with it because it's so short and sweet. It's over like that in the blink of an eye almost. So even if there are issues with the story, and there are, like, there's little areas, mainly the writing really, where there would be little stuff that I was just like, okay. But it doesn't feel like it's wasting your time as much as a big book would. Like, if this book was 300 pages, I think I would be having the complaint of it was too much. It was just kind of a lot of filler. But this book has none of that. It is so to the point and straightforward, and I love that. I love that in a book. I hate when books waste my time with just nonsense in them. And to be frank, a lot of books nowadays are doing that, and this is a newer release that doesn't do that. It's really short and sweet and to the point, and I love it. I think on a scale of 1 to 10 stars, I think I would have to give this book 8 stars out of 10. Again, it gets into kind of trippy territory towards the end, and that's really my forte. I love when books do that, when I'm reading and I just have to kind of go back and reread a sentence because I'm like, what in the world am I reading right now? And this book has a lot of stuff like that, a lot of deeper themes that maybe I didn't dig into as much, but short book. I'll keep my review of it short and sweet. The next book I read, and probably the craziest book out of any of these that I read, is The Wasp Factory by Iain Banks. Little bit of an older book. I've heard it called a cult classic before. Found this book from a Disturbing Books iceberg chart a while ago that I was watching, and it came up on there. I thought the short summary of it on the iceberg sounded really interesting, so I had added it to my want to read list, and then when I had the idea to read some horror books, some more disturbing stuff come Halloween time, I was like, oh, I'll finally get to read that book that I've been waiting to read. And I read it, and let me just say, this book deserved to be on the Disturbing Book iceberg. This book is a trip, and not in the way that this book is a trip, where it has trippy aspects to it. This whole book is like, what? And then you get to the ending, and you're like, I can tell you, I just sat for a second after the ending, and I was like sitting there like this, just like, huh? My short summary is just that there's a boy named Frank. He lives on kind of an island with his father, and his brother was sent away to a mental institution, and his brother breaks out of that institution and starts making his way back towards the island that they live on. When I say island too, I mean like they live on a beach basically. But his brother starts making his way back, and his brother is this psychotic, insane guy who's setting fire to dogs. So people's dogs start going missing, all this stuff. The name of the book, The Wasp Factory, I don't really have a way to summarize this book, if I'm being honest. I'm trying to get through it, and I had kind of written down some stuff so that it would make it easier for me to summarize. I just don't have words almost. It's just too crazy. So I guess that's all I'll say is just kid named Frank. He lives with his dad on a beach house kind of, and his crazy brother Eric breaks out. But do not be fooled. Our main character Frank is just as insane as his brother, and he's doing some insane stuff too. We figure out about some crimes that he's committed before that might even be worse than his brother's crimes. I totally see why this book is a cult classic. Another one that I just couldn't really put down, because the whole time you're being led along this trail by the author, Iain Banks. It's kind of like, if you've ever seen those old, like, I think they were State Farm commercials or something, where there's a fisherman with $1 on a fishing pole, and someone's trying to get it. He's like, you almost got it. You almost got it. That's kind of what this book reminded me of in a weird way. Because you keep getting these little insights into a darker thing happening. And what's happening on the surface is very dark. But you get these little glimpses of like a darker thing going on in the background. And you're like, am I reading too much into this? Is this just going to end up being nothing? And then at the end, it ends up being a lot more than you thought it would be. Like, I was like, oh, it's going to be something like kind of minor to do with this character and one of the crimes we know he committed. And then it totally threw a curveball at me. And I'm sitting there like, oh, I didn't even think of it being something to do with that. Again, I picked like kind of the two hardest books right off the bat to like really talk about and delve into. I think I might do a whole video on this in the future because I just want to read it again and really take some detailed notes and make maybe a whole like 10-20 minute long video just talking about this book in general, because this book is so good. Another shorter read too, coming in at 184 pages for this copy in particular. If you like disturbing books that are kind of teasy with you almost, get this book. I can't recommend it enough. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give this book a 9 out of 10 stars. I was thinking about giving it a 10 right after I read it, but there are some parts in here where the writing is really weak and it's just, you read it and it sticks out like a sore thumb and it's kind of cringe. My final kind of thoughts on this video before I get into the last one is just how kind of demented it is, but also in a way near the end a little bit wholesome. I don't know if that really makes sense, but in the end you're almost left with this little bit of hope, I feel like. And while I was reading this, I couldn't help but kind of compare it in my head to A Clockwork Orange. So if you've read that book before and you enjoyed it, which I'm not even the biggest fan of this book, I probably would have given this like a 6 out of 10 or something, but this book, I kind of see a lot of parallels to it. Maybe it's just because this book is more Irish and this book is kind of like British adjacent. So maybe it's just that, like me being an American in my head, they both are written in like an accent. So then I'm just like, oh, these books are similar. But I really think this kind of has a lot of similarities to that. More in like vibes alone than really like story structure and everything. But yeah, if you like Clockwork Orange and you've read that before, pick this up. If you really don't like Clockwork Orange, you might not like this one. But again, I wasn't a huge fan of Clockwork Orange, and this is like one of my favorite books that I think I've ever read. I really want to read this again. It's so disturbing, but so entertaining and interesting at the same time. Last book I read was The Exorcist, and this is by William Peter Blatty. This story follows a young girl and her mother. The young girl starts experiencing some strange happenings. The mother is a little distraught, brings her to all these doctors, and they can't explain it. Finally, a doctor recommends her to just see an exorcist because the things happening are so unexplainable and weird. She goes and gets an exorcist. Kind of what ensues is the exorcist almost doubting if what's going on is real, and in the end, it is real. And they have to perform an exorcism. And that's just a short summary, but I think that describes it pretty well. I read this whole book today. That's how good it was. This book is 363 pages. I woke up early this morning because I was excited to get into it. I read it all today. This might be the biggest book I've ever read in one day, because I've read stuff in one day, but it's generally books that are like 100 pages. Not like 320 page books. And I did listen to the audiobook a little bit, but for the most part, it was just reading the book. This book, I don't even know where to start with it, because reading it cover to cover in one day, I just have to say I love this book so much. I'm gonna have to read it again at some point. Every single one of the books that I read, I'm gonna have to reread at some point because I love them so much. Which is kind of like, for the video, I feel like I really should have more complaints, but I picked too good of books this year. So next year, when it comes around Halloween time, I'll have to pick up some books that maybe I won't like as much, but I think I picked like top tier stuff. This book makes you feel a lot, I think. A lot of the time, my complaint with books is that they don't really pull you in as much as they should and make you care as much. There's a lot of like authors I can think of specifically where whenever I've read one of their books, it's just been like, I have no emotional connection at all. And this story, it doesn't have any like real relation to my life as much because I'm not a mother, I'm not a daughter like in the story, and I'm not like a priest that can perform exorcisms or anything, but every single one of these characters you're kind of attached to he has a way of making them very likable, even though they're all very human. Like, every single one of these characters has flaws and issues that come out during the story, but it's kind of a high-stress situation, so you understand and you feel kind of bad for them as it's happening. And even through all the chaos that's erupting around them, there's still so much humanity in the story. Like, I like how close-knit and familial it feels, I guess. Even the stuff with the priest, it kind of, for the time that it was published, I forget the exact date, but I know it was quite a while ago. I'll put the date right here. But for the time that it was published, I'm sure this was very controversial and pretty groundbreaking, I would assume. Part of the story is kind of dealing with this priest who is kind of in a crisis of faith, and he's almost slipping away from faith a little bit, partially because he loses his mother, and he has some issues with, like, the hierarchy of the church not allowing him to move to be closer to his mother in New York and everything. But there's other reasons too, and the book kind of explores it more in depth. Every character in this book is so well fleshed out. It's really amazing, because the book isn't as long as you would think it would need to be to really get all this detail and get all these characters, like, their own stuff going on. Because our main character, Chris, the little girl's mother, she has these kind of servants in the house, and each one of them, I think there's 4, if I'm remembering correctly. I think it's 4, and each one of them is also very humanized and has their own little story going on, kind of, and you know things about these people like you really would if you were this mom in the story and you were around these people all day and they were helping you with stuff. After I finished this, I looked up to see what else William Peter has written, and he did a sequel book to The Exorcist, kind of, that I'll probably end up reading at some point. But he really wasn't as prolific as I kind of hoped that he would be, because I was like, I'm going to have to read every single one of this guy's books. And then I looked, and there wasn't a ton there to delve into. You just end up feeling so much for every character in the story, where this awful situation is happening around them, where this little girl is possessed. The demon inside of her is, like, hurting her and causing her to do some awful things too. You really feel, like, the despair and the kind of isolation, because they can't just go and tell everyone about this. Like, they can't just go and tell, like, all the psychiatrists and everything, because they don't want her to get sent away to an institution or something, because they know at a certain point, like, hey, this is not psychological anymore. This is a demonic attack on her. So then, in the end of the book, when the real, like, exorcism is finally about to occur, you feel this huge weight that has just been building throughout the whole book. Because the exorcism doesn't even really get going until around page, like, 317. And there's only 364 pages in the book. This whole book is just building momentum to where you're sitting there and they're trying to kind of get approval for the exorcism and everything. And you're like, please just do something, because every now and then there's a scene where they'll go into the little girl's room, right? And she'll just be writhing around, and it's horrific. It's nightmare inducing. So you just imagine in your head, like, this little girl just, like, oppressed by a spirit, and you're just like, please get her out of this. So when it finally comes down to that in the end, it's this giant weight and this kind of release as well, where every character in the book, you can tell, even though they're going into kind of the climax, they're kind of having a minute to breathe almost, because they're like, okay, we're finally being believed about this, and we can finally do what's going to hopefully help her. And I might be a little bit partial to this book because it's green. This edition that I got is the hardcover, and it comes with, like, the end of the pages in green. And I really like that. It kind of adds a little more aura to the book, I feel like. Yeah, this book is really something special. It ended up being one of my favorites if I had to rate it, scale of 1 to 10 stars, 10 out of 10. But I just loved this book. Again, I couldn't put it down. I was just like, oh my gosh, this story is so good. And yeah, that's it. That is 3 books that I read for Halloween season. Again, I really read more like 8 books because I read The Slob and the Son of the Slob and then 3 Goosebumps books. I didn't get to read as much like classic kind of horror stuff and like newer stuff and all that because I was focused on making those videos as well. So you can go and check those out if you're interested in seeing the other stuff I read this month. But these were the ones that I wanted to dedicate a video to and talk about just a little more. I hadn't read a whole lot of horror novels or anything in the past, so I was a little nervous going in that it wasn't going to be my style. Even though I like horror movies and everything, I was kind of like, am I going to enjoy it in book form? And I ended up enjoying it a lot more than I thought I would. And again, it might have just been because I picked out some good books, but I really enjoyed it. Alright guys, I guess that's it. That has been my Halloween special, the horror books that I read in preparation. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments. I'd like to have a discussion or something about them because nobody I know has really read these books. So if you have read them, let me know what you think about them. Even if it's negative, I would like to hear it because I don't have too much negative to say about these. So I'd be interested to hear perspectives like that, I guess. Yeah, that's it for this video, guys. I wish I had read more stuff to share with y'all, but I just didn't have all the time in the world. I wish I did because I would just spend it reading, but, you know, work, school, and all that stuff, whatever. If you made it this far in this video, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.